It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Ha, it's Feedback Friday, and I realize I'm wearing the same sweater I wore in Tuesday's video. Oops. It's clean. It's just the quirk of laundry day. As you can tell, my shot's a little different. I've been trying to get picture clarity a little better. I've reconfigured a new capture card for the PS5. I've been doing stuff this week. But also this week, I took the step of doing a preliminary Google web form for the Leanna Cares service, the one-on-one chat sessions that are an extension of Wellness Wednesday. I will mention this on Wellness Wednesday, but it's there. Links in the description box below. Two reasons I'm doing a Google form. One, taking out a Gmail with a name that makes sense is just too freaking hard. And one of the people building the website, unfortunately, has gotten COVID. I'm sure it'll be a mild case. He's vaccinated, but, you know, I want him to be able to have the opportunity to get better. And I figured this will help kind of figure out what information we have to collect on this after all. Learned with the boss fight surveys that they're works in progress, and it's good to learn from feedback and do sort of a soft launch on something like this before we go full bore into the full website and everything like that. So if you are interested in signing up, right now it's Wednesdays and Thursdays with a few additional appointments. Costs more for those times just because of, my time and my schedule. But have a look, read it through. If you're interested, fill out the form and we will get that process started. Super, super excited about it. And of course, if you want to help with these sorts of endeavors with Wellness Wednesday, with this sort of stuff, positivity as well as analysis, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. Wellness Wednesday was interesting this week because somebody actually had a question regarding focus connected to the thing about motivation, and it was about art, specifically art. And what they said was, sorry, my eye lines are all weird here. I was watching videos to improve my art when I came across a video about bad art advice. In short, constant practice is said to be bad advice because people don't always focus when practicing. Supposedly, people are only capable up to 5 hours of focus without rest. Seeing how focus and motivation can go hand in hand, I thought this was an interesting subject to bring up, especially with questions like how much rest is needed to focus. Individual results may vary. Some people need... rest is super important to embed the skill in the parts of the brain that allow it to become sort of second nature, right? Short term, long term, that sort of stuff, especially muscle memory. Rest is just super important for anything involving memory. There are a lot of different techniques. I think 5 hours is way too long to spend at any given crack on anything. I know professional artists do it because they're on deadlines and they need to draw and draw and draw and draw. But, for somebody who's learning, I kind of think 90 minutes max, then stop, sleep on it. The problem with practice, I actually talked to Mary Jess, the art director on Song of Sparkle Muffin, because he's the artist, not me. I can talk about performance, I can talk about, other skills related to memory, learning songs and stuff like that. But art, he's the guy. And, he said, yes, sleep's super important. The thing about practicing is if you're copying a pro and you don't understand why the pro is doing what they're doing, you could just be practicing their mistakes instead of what they do right. Hello, Sally Betty. And that's true of everything in the arts. I think that's true, period. Even with management stuff, mentoring, you got to always sort of maintain that critical faculty. I know with me when I was, learning how to manage, I tried to emulate what, you know, the people I looked up to did, and they were all men. And I unfortunately learned the hard way that people receive women, especially in a lot of media, they receive women very, very differently for doing the exact same things. And you gotta sort of make it your own and take the underlying principles, what the intention is that you're doing, and find a way to make it work in a way that's productive. And yeah, that was a hard lesson. So hopefully that helps. And then someone said they find motivating by measuring improvement. Seeing how far they can improve over time. I find that really useful. They talked about training themselves how to do a headstand, which that's exactly how I learned to do a headstand too. You just sort of get that core balance. And they said, and yet I still hate doing sit-ups. And I chuckled at that because sit-ups are one of the few exercises I actually really enjoy. I really like doing sit-ups. I don't know why. I'm weird. But it took actually a while to get the correct form so that you were actually engaging the abdomen and not the legs and not hurting your back by wrenching. So that might be why this person hates sit-ups. I don't know. I'm not a personal trainer. I'm just saying. But getting to the article that Jason Schreier wrote about Ken Levine, there was a lot of three kind of main pockets. People talking about, cool, weird auteur game devs, especially Japanese ones. Yoko Taro came up, and yeah, I love some of the stories about Yoko Taro because, Nier Automata was almost canceled because he hated waking up early. But, the game is awesome. That one was a game that at first I'm like, I don't get this, what's going on. It takes a long time to get into, but that is definitely an auteur game because, it's the multiple endings and it's the sort of going back and replaying it with what you know, and then sort of the message of the ending that makes, and you gotta give yourself that intake process, right? I did not like that game at first. It was very, very frustrating early on. The art style is actually what kept me, but by the end I'm like, yeah, okay, I get this. And, I'll stand for that game because I do think it accomplishes its goals in what it tends to do. The maps suck on it, and bad maps drive me crazy. People asked me about my opinions about Bioshock Infinite and why I think it's a mess. They're like, I loved it. I have to be very, very careful about my opinions about Bioshock Infinite because they tend to trigger people who don't have the same reactions I did. I got barraged with hate when Bioshock Infinite came out, and I reviewed it, and I only gave it an 8 out of 10. And basically it was certain things are really great, certain things are really fucking awful, and there's really no in between on this game. And one of the things, the Lutece twins, I cosplayed Rosalind Lutece. I think they're fucking brilliant characters, but much like a lot of the secondary characters and a lot of stuff in the Bioshock franchise, I don't really think they totally knew what they had there. I don't know. But there were obvious elements of things just being ripped out whole cloth. And not really explained. Things like anti-Semitic slurs scrawled on the walls of busted vending machines, and the vending machines had a figure on them wearing a yarmulke, and obviously there was a story behind that somewhere with the racism of choosing to throw a baseball at an interracial couple and stuff like that. But it never really went anywhere. That felt like an underlying thing that was sort of pulled out. Same with the sort of tying in of what happened to, the indigenous people in America. I think they're called Indians down there. We don't call them Indians up here. But, what happened at the Battle of Wounded Knee and the misunderstandings and all that stuff. And there were certain things with the handymen enemies that I felt were just really incomplete. I wasn't thrilled about the skyhook mechanics. And then, but the thing I took massive shit about, even though I said, an overuse of light bloom, a weird reference to Elizabeth's first period, just a lot of stuff that this is a lot of stimulus. Where does it go? I don't know. There seemed to be a bigger idea here that didn't get executed. And I think I gave it an 8 just because of the things it did do well. Problems with game balance early on as well. But, I did think there were enough interesting characters and cool moments or everything like that. That pushed it up from a 7 to an 8 to me. But I did think it was very, very flawed. I enjoyed elements of the game. I think it got better as it went on. But I had a real issue with the ending. And took a lot of shit for the issues with the ending. And the issues I had with the ending are completely subjective, and me, it was more about the execution of it than what they were trying to do. But this idea that spoiler, if you don't think the game ends, it's all about basically Booker, and everything's about Booker, and Elizabeth doesn't really matter. And it felt like a false sacrifice. And I just felt like it was more ego than message. And it, I think I said at the time, it felt sort of male entitlement-y. There was an element of male entitlement in the messaging, that all these other characters were just in support of Booker's personal torture journey, that in the end, no one else really mattered but him. And I didn't feel like the game and the gameplay and everything like that explored those themes sufficiently. I've played games that are sort of navel-gazy that way and worked. Can't think of them right now. It'll come to me after I finish this video, but that is not necessarily Silent Hill 2. Silent Hill 2 is a shining example of it's all about psychosexual self-torture, right? But everything's intentional about that. Awesome. The guy has guilt related to sex. It's all in there, right? Fine. Really intentional about that theme. But the ending of Bioshock was just so calibrated for egocentric male game critics to love, because it was made by egocentric male game devs. Non-egocentric male game devs came in to save it. That's not their fault. Not everybody. And just because you like Bioshock Infinite does not make you egocentric. I'm saying what my issues with it were. It failed to execute what it seemed to be intense, which is something about the nature of choice or reality, or I don't know. It was such a mess. It didn't have that sort of neat prodigal son coming in for this sort of clash with destiny kind of thing, also Manchurian Candidate, yada yada, of the first one, or even the sort of, hey, we're going to do to collectivism what we did to objectivism, with Bioshock 2 and Bioshock 1. I thought Sophia Lamb was a better antagonist than Comstock. I found Comstock, ironically, just a really stock character of the time. And that was sort of disappointing because, again, the Lutece twins were right there, and Elizabeth was kind of interesting, but it just did not. And we can't expect every game to be the original Bioshock, right? It was how messy Infinite was, and it didn't have to be. And part of the sensitivity to that messiness was the game happened to come out on Passover that year. It was the week before Easter, and it was Passover that year. So I just do the Seder, I sit down, I'm playing a game, and okay, we have this heavy-handed Christian imagery, and there's sort of there was an overlap, I forget what the actual scripture was, but then we get into the the anti-Semitic slur. I don't even know if I can say it on YouTube. It's not a big one, but it is a slur, so I gotta be careful. And like the character's got a yarmulke and the vending machines are smashed, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? You're just hitting me with something jarring and kind of upsetting and not telling me why. And what I got from fans of the game at the time is, well, Ken Levine's Jewish, so it's okay. First of all, he said himself he's not really practicing, but also I am fully in support of offensive content in games. It's got to be done with purpose. I can say I defend his right to do it, and also say I think the way it was executed was terrible and just left me feeling kind of, what the fuck is it? What the fuck is this? This is some like low grade edgelord bullshit, not something I felt actually served a purpose the way, again, it has in other games that deal with things like racism in a much more conscious way. And, you know, anti-Semitism is a tricky one because it'll so offend people on the left that a lot of game devs don't want to do it. And I caught shit for how, you know, The Last of Us 2 handled it. And some people made some very passionate comments about The Last of Us 2 as well. I'm not going to bother getting into those because I agreed with them. I do think the series is just, I was such a huge fan of the first game. I was okay with the DLC. The second game just, I do agree that they ripped the emotional guts, they ripped the emotional core out of that franchise. Not just by killing Joel, but also just by making Ellie so broken with no healing at the end. Like, Ellie, as we knew her, is gone as much as Joel is gone. And none of the other characters that they introduced in its place, and this is what the commenter said, made up for that loss. And I agree. I don't think there's anywhere to go left with that franchise. And the reason, I'll just say, because this was the topic, the reason I think it'll make a terrible HBO show is if it's not a video game, The Last of Us is essentially The Walking Dead, and that's all. And The Walking Dead has just been done. The first few seasons of The Walking Dead were really cool. It's completely out of gas now. So HBO's going to do a zombie show when the AMC zombie show, and there's two of the fuckers, is completely out of gas. There's nothing new in The Last of Us as a TV show. It used the zombie thing to do cool gameplay mechanics and get to know characters we liked. And it was kind of good action stealth. You know, it was that sort of in between. It was a fun ride. It was a fun ride, and it was fun to play. You take out that fun to play thing, it's nothing. It's The Walking Dead with a bigger budget. That's why I don't think it'll make a particularly good HBO show. Moving on to the actual meat, I wanted to leave this until the end because it's somebody disagreeing with me in a way, but I thought it was fair and went, yeah, okay, this is an example of somebody not having inside information and seeing something I didn't. So I enjoy this sort of feedback. I really, really love things that enhance the dialogue this way about Jason Schreier's coverage. I did say that it was not perfect, but it was a step in the right direction. The response to that was, I do have one core problem with this article, and that is the use of an anonymous disgruntled employee as a source for some of the more extreme claims. And I went back and looked, and that there was somebody who went on the record, but it is true that there were a couple people who didn't put their names on things. And I missed that because it tracked with what I have also heard from working on Ken Levine's projects. So fair point that I missed, but the commenter goes on to explain it further, and I think it's an excellent explanation, primarily because it's so completely at odds with Schreier's previous assertions that he knew about the Blizzard stuff and had sources, but he didn't have enough to print and had to sit on it for years. These are just totally different standards for different people, and he's offered no explanation for why it wasn't okay to report then, it is okay to report now. If he came out and said, I should have reported what Blizzard was doing, I messed up and I changed my practices to not repeat that mistake, I would give him at least provisional benefit of the doubt, but I can't give that same benefit of the doubt to silence in the face of such a clear double standard. And I think that's super fair. My intent there was not to say, oh, he's great now. It's just he's doing better with this. But that's completely fair to call out the fact that, yes, he did sit on... And let me give you my theory. I have no idea if this is accurate. And I still think what he did was wrong. I still think the way he tried to dodge responsibility for it was wormy. I know for me, I could not report on the poor treatment at Blizzard because I was compromised, because I was subjected to the uniquely poor treatment of women at the hands of Blizzard. I couldn't write about it objectively because I was part of it. Nowadays, you could write a whole first-person account of the shitty treatment you experienced, but, you couldn't do that back then. It was a different time. And none of the guys I worked with wanted to dig into it. I think because it was really easier to look the other way, and hey, they were quite fine to still get access at Blizzard when I couldn't. But I also think that they just really worshipped Blizzard. They thought Blizzard was super cool and this big popular thing. And, when it became Blizzard Activision, it was, oh God, all the freaking Call of Duty and, WoW and Destiny. And it was like, they have some massive, massive, massive titles. And they knew that they'd cut people's access. Like, access to everything. Not put them in timeout for a while. Cut people's access. And there was... And I think that a lot of guys have not come to terms with this. Women did speak up. They weren't believed. It was seen as us just complaining and not owning that we did something wrong. Or we weren't aggressive enough, or we were too aggressive. I think people feel such intense guilt for that now who were involved that they can't admit wrongdoing. It's too deep a well. They're in too deep. They're so guilty for how complicit they were in a lot of stuff that it's not that they're deliberately lying. They can't admit to themselves that they did see things and dismissed it. And I say this with compassion because, I know how much it ate at me to have to sit on it and kind of not play nice, be honest, but I couldn't prove anything I said. It was, my word against big video game companies and their legions of possibly, potentially abusive fans. Some of those franchises have kind of toxic communities surrounding them, right? Destiny has been better since Bungie broke away from Activision. I will give them that, and that says something. But I know how hard it was to sit on, and I was sort of like, when the riot thing happened, I'm like, wait, this is everywhere. And the Ubi thing happened, I'm like, wait, this is everywhere. And, and I think part of it, not to defend it, was that because it was everywhere, there was a part of it that male journalists were just happy to take the advantage. There was a part of it that male journalists at the time did not think women in similar jobs really loved gaming or were as knowledgeable about gaming as they was. There was sort of, well, you should just be happy to be here kind of attitude. And to be abundantly clear, that was not my experience at The Escapist at all, because one of my direct managers was a woman. But also, Alex McCrease never treated me like I was just the girl. There were just too many women writing there at the time. I want to be abundantly clear that was not my experience at The Escapist. The minute The Escapist changed to new ownership and I contacted them, say, hey, I was treated like a problem again. Why? Because I reported abuse and got blackballed and threatened with a lawsuit for it. Again, that was internal. That wasn't me as a journalist. That was me as somebody who was looking to rekindle a relationship with a brand that, I had a fond experience at. It sucked the way it ended, but, I liked my time there. And I thought, hey, let's give it another go. And immediately there were very clear problems. And so there is still some cleanup in the industry. There is cleanup at the very gaming websites that are supposed to be watchdogs for these companies. And that is a problem. I can only hope that as it expands into services like Bloomberg and the Washington Post, that there will be a bit more due diligence for that. But they hire one gaming guy and they hire a guy, right, to do it. They're not going to hire a woman at the New York Times to cover video games as their main beat. They're just not. There's still too many stereotypes about this sort of stuff. And then, of course, it's coming out. There were a couple articles over the weekend from people who left major news organizations claiming that they are more interested in Orwellian newspeak. The example was the fact that there's no LGBTQ gender pronouns in Tagalog, and how difficult that is for non-binary people who are Tagalog. The language, speak Tagalog. But things like, housing affordability and actually like racism that does more than hurt feelings, that's not being covered in a way that I'll link the article. It's unfortunately the link is the National Post, but it started as a Substack. I just say unfortunately because the National Post does sort of lean right culture war, but the person who wrote it is somebody my husband knew, and he assures me that no, she's left wing. She's not like that. So I'll link to that as well for what it's worth, so you can see what my concerns are there. But it is totally fair for this commenter, and I really appreciate the people, especially the people who are sort of more to the right than I am, who, even though their personal politics, and now, you know what, I shouldn't say this commenter is more to the right than me. We have different approaches to progressivism. But, people who don't have to call this stuff out, and people who have been demonized for insisting on better, for this sort of writing and insisting on accountability. I give credit for standards. And that's part of the reason I read this comment and addressed this comment, because I do think it's a fair point. I do think the reporting is accurate. However, this is why it's important to deal with this sort of feedback and go, I see your point. I can corroborate this, But yes, I totally understand your suspicions here, and it is something to watch in future, because sloppy practices can mean it's still accurate, but it can also mean it's not. And so, good catch. Thank you for that. I'll wrap there because it's been half an hour, but hope you enjoyed it. Again, check out the links. Check out the Leanna Cares link if you want to sign up for that. Wednesdays and Thursdays are the days I'm starting off slow because I got a lot of other things going on. But yeah, check it out. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching.